Do you feel it? Her breath of air blowing for you, waking our spirits for adventure. Do you see it? Her diverse beauty, untouched and waiting, radiating smiles of a blissful nation. Can you taste it? Her colourful abundance. She provides and they flavour. Can you smell it? The scent of a powerful land. This is your cultural
My capacity
thrill.
as coordinator and representing the Department of Culture under this brand, it is my distinct honor to welcome you here this evening, this distinguished panel of creative minds. Ms. Ralycia Andrews, our moderator, my friend Ms. Perez, representing the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela. I see some representatives from different cultural organizations, SVG AMP, the Avenues Dance Group company, the Carnival Bands Incorporated, among others. Mr. Steve Wiley, members of the media, those who are viewing via VC3, good evening. Discussions or forums like these are very, very important. That is why we have chosen this activity to open the 2024 National Performing Arts Festival. Usually, we would have started off with a play or an evening of poetry or monologues or skits. We thought it was very important in this time to have a discussion on the state of culture and the arts in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Since COVID-19, we have faced with many, many challenges in the sector, in the creative and cultural sector. And many creatives and practitioners, artisans, etc., have been meeting us on the streets and been making the call, the plea for us to have such a conversation. I know tonight we are competing with a number of events that's happening nationally, but I'm very happy to have VC3 carrying this discussion live so that the general public, the wider public, and those in the diaspora can be engaged. So, our partners, the University of the West Indies Global Campus, who is also having an event at this time, the Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, our Soca Nation, our Project Forward, among other partners, we would like to thank you very much for your partnership during this festival. Next weekend, we would endeavor to make history. That is, we, the National Theatre Arts Executing Theme, will put on a mock hanging presentation. I believe it's the first time that such a presentation is being done in a theatre format, on stage in the halls of Peace Memorial Hall in this festival. And next week, you would see actors as young as 12 reenacting or enacting one of our traditional cultural practice, mock hanging. And I am inviting every single one of you to come out and witness this cultural reenactment, a night of folk and reenactment. Also on the Sunday night, a very interesting partner, Mr. Steve Wiley and company, will put on an evening of excellent performances of the best poets, monologue, music performances, a night of rich culture next week at this same venue, next week, the 24th at 6 o'clock. The following weekend, we'll bring the curtains down on the festival with Dance Bongo, a play written by Trinidadian Errol Hill, starting 7 o'clock right here at this venue and being directed by Mr. Jekyll Mars, with over 30, almost 30, young Vincentian actors. That is something you don't want to miss. And I'm encouraging you to get your tickets. The mock hanging is $30 and the play is $50 right here at the Peace Memorial Hall or at the Department of Culture, because the seats are filling up very, very fast. So, thank you very much for your attention. Have a good night. I'll pass you over to our moderator, Miss Ralycia Andrews.
Good night, everybody. My name is Ralycia Andrews, and as stated, I am your moderator tonight with this esteemed panel of cultural and creative innovators from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. So just to ease us into the panel, I'm going to ask everybody to introduce themselves, because although some of you may have known their faces, you might not have known the people behind the work. So, Ms. Rudette, we can start with you if you don't mind.
It's a real honor to be here. Thank you so much to the organizers for putting together this collection of my colleagues here, creative kindreds. My name's Vonnie Rudette. I currently work with Hand to Earth, which is a local NGO on cultural development projects.
Hello, yeah. Hello, good night. My name is Akley Olton. I'm a filmmaker and visual artist from St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Well, I guess that's something I say, but really I'm a guy from St. Vincent who has believed in art and creativity, and I've tried to put myself in places to, in business terms, exploit that. And yeah, that's who I am. You know, I'm a guy from St. Vincent who's trying to make and develop creative projects.
Good evening, everyone. I found myself wearing about 12.5 hats over the last few years, but primarily at my core, I'm a aspiring singer, songwriter, cultural practitioner. I found myself within this field for 20-odd years. I'm currently serving in the capacity as assistant to the coordinator of cultural industries within the Ministry of Tourism, Civil Aviation, Sustainable Development and Culture. I know it's a mouthful, in the Department of Culture specifically, and my name is Bomani Charles.
Good evening, my name is Anthony Thibbles. I am a retired civil servant. I think of myself as a servant of culture and a student of culture. I have been writing a lot since I've retired, and I still try to keep in touch with the artists of St. Vincent and the Grenadines, whether they are in art or in dance or in cuisine. And I try to encourage them and assist them as much as it is possible. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. So seeing that we have such a wide range of individuals up here, one of the things that I was interested in is if you had any questions for each other to begin this panel. We're commenting on the state of the arts in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and of course, it's important to have the artists themselves propose questions. So feel free to jump right in if you do have any questions. Akley, I see it seems like you're ready.
Question, it was more of a comment, and it's just to share a little pre-conversation I was having here with Miss Rudette. And those of you who don't know, I am a student of Miss Vonnie Rudette. I feel I've grown to become this very confident, creative voice, and I feel like that journey started when I met Miss Vonnie Rudette. So I just wanted to point that out. And as a person who's been looking and finding and kind of like, you know, just kind of believing in manifesting ways to produce and to live as an artist in St. Vincent, you know, like we've been doing this for a long time, and we were here reflecting on how, you know, there were times gone by when we used to sit and dream of like a St. Vincent where we'll have conversations about the creative industry, where we'll have, one production this week, another production next week. And it's kind of amazing, really, to sit in this moment and be a part of it, So I feel like we could start there. Like, something interesting is happening now, like right now, I feel like the industry is like, it's emerging in its own way.
So, given that each of you have integrated yourselves in the industry in your very own ways, and I've noticed through reading your bios, seeing the work that you do on your social media pages, just getting to know you for this panel, every single one of you have engaged with students, young people within the community in very different ways. So it would be interesting for you to share, how do we ensure that the arts are more implemented into our curriculum to get individuals like Akley, being a student of Miss Rudette, more enthused about arts, and not just art in a streamlined way, but the different nuances in music, the different nuances in film, the different nuances in theater, grassroots activism, and sustainability. What would you propose to have those implemented better into our curriculums?
If I might be allowed to make a few comments there. I very recently had someone ask me about my pen name, which I utilize for my writing. My pen name is Claude Anthony, and it is a homage to my father, who was Claude. My interest and my willingness to pursue the arts was because of lying in a hammock, hearing him recite poetry. I was no more than 4 or 6 years old. If there isn't an environment around you that supports your artistic interest, it will die. That's my comment in response to you.
I think I echo those sentiments to the degree that most of us who find ourselves as, for lack of a better term, left-brain people who are creative by nature, we were born that way. From the earliest stages of our memory, we remember being, whatever the field is, if it's music or art or movies, whatever it is, we remember being enamored as young boys and girls. We remember trying to define how we can immerse ourselves in this thing, whatever it was. And we recall searching for a space that is already, in existence, that would accept us. For most of us, there was no such space. For me, at least, there was no such space. So I literally had to create that environment for myself. I wanted to learn how to write songs. As a teenager, I remember this very vividly. There were no songwriters in my immediate vicinity. I went to the public library, and I found one book in the entire library that spoke to songwriting. And I sat that afternoon and I read that entire book, and it gave me concepts and so on. And then I translated that into practice and so on. And all the way through into my early 20s, when I started finding myself around musicians, I actively went seeking tutors and teachers. I see one of my teachers here in the audience, Mr. Jaffena, who's my music teacher, and sort of maneuvering my way into the space. I would like to propose that we begin to consider cobbling together a targeted environment that fosters the development of talents from as young an age as possible. Not necessarily to replace the academics or the other things that we ought to be interested in a developing society, but for persons to be able to channel and grow within the creative field that inherent naturally. I think that's a way that we can begin.
Yes, I think a common thread through the comments that everybody's made so far has been this one of an environment, an enabling environment for creative expression, and how can we create that to foster the creative responses in our youth. I think that pertains to the question you were asking. And with regards to the syllabus, obviously the education system is a key area in which this can happen, so that individual children like yourself don't have to go and find the environment for yourself, but it is fostered. And this is what Akley was referring to in terms of our first encounter and sharing with each other. Well, by the way, I'm the student now, I think. But with regards to the syllabus itself in visual arts, at least, I know, probably for music as well, is fairly broad, and it really gives a stipulation of what an institution should adhere to with the curriculum. I think the question we need to address is the syllabus itself, is how the teachers translate the content or the curriculum into a practical lesson plan and create an enabling environment and developmental focus on the creative and the visual arts. Now, creativity is a general function of life itself. We understand that. And I think if we're looking at how we can foster a more vibrant creative sector, don't like to say industry, but industry is productive, but it also spells sort of a replication and formulaic approach to creativity. But we need to recognize that creativity in itself is fueling the creative sector. You can have, for instance, if I use the analogy of agriculture, where you can have all the infrastructure in place, the processing plants, you know, the market strategy decided upon. If you don't have the crops, if the crops fail, or if the crops are not good quality, then all the infrastructure you put in place is not doing the job that it was designed for. Similarly, with the creative arts, the crops really relate to creativity itself, or the creative production. How do we foster creativity as a basic function of education as well as daily life? You know, so there's a lot to unpack in all of that, and it really is key to have the teachers on board and for the teachers to be trained in creative education, in creative teaching methods, because every subject actually in primary school at least can be taught through the arts, every single of the four main subject areas.
If I may be allowed to add a thought. Most of the time, when students or our society, our parents, approach the idea of education and the education system, they are not thinking about learning. They are thinking about passing an exam. And if that is how we goad our teachers and we measure our teachers, how many of your students have passed a particular exam, we're going to end up with less creativity and more certification.
And we struggle to find the balance between the two, I think. I could use the example of the National School Bands Showcase, which is sponsored by the Teachers Credit Union. We've had this program going for about 5 or 6 years now. And I'm happy to be a part of the production team. And it speaks to, this environment that I wish I had back when I was coming up, that students can actually look forward to an event, those who are musically inclined, to showcase what they've learned in the curriculum, the music curriculum, and their rehearsals and so on a big stage, big production and everything. But the challenge has always been to balance the two. And we find that some schools are more sensitive and accommodating, depending on maybe who the principal is or if the teachers are culturally inclined and so on, and some schools struggle. And it manifests itself in the final product. You can always see in the performances which schools invested the time in preparing for the event and which schools may not have. And one of the complaints, for lack of a better term, that we get is, students are preparing for exams. Band rehearsals are going to be on the lower end of the priority scale for this, and they always have to try to squeeze in rehearsal time sometimes on a Friday afternoon and so on and so forth. So it speaks to that struggle as to how we assimilate the creative arts into the curriculum smoothly so that it doesn't feel as though it's an extra curricular activity, but rather part of the whole learning experience, coupled with the academics and an opportunity to refine your natural talent in the school environment.
Ultimately, I think we have to decide where we want to take it. I feel like the struggle is evident, like we all could speak of the struggle in our collective and individual experiences about why things don't work necessarily how we imagine that it should or it could. But ultimately, like, we have to decide where to put the emphasis, right? The struggle with the with parents or creating the enabling environment is essentially because we are a society that does not necessarily see fruits coming from these plants you've been farming, So we are like, why do we invest in this if we don't get any returns? And ultimately, even though you do get some returns, some things here and there, some accolades, the real returns that will convince the people is a financial return that would convince the environment to invest. It would convince the parents to relax and let the picnic do what it want to do, enjoy it, explore yourself. And I guess that's the frustration that we all feel, trying to figure that out. And the way how I'm seeing it right now, I see, like when you have these Venn diagrams, I see one circle that's education, another circle that's full business and industry, and how we could have those kind of like intersect and feed into each other. Like that's how I'm seeing it in my head. And then it's how to like take that further, because ultimately, for me now as an individual that grew up here and then had a little bit, of traveling in my older years, I feel like, I go to places and I see how they monetize cultural industries and tourism. I see how they do it. And I see that we have all the elements here in excess. But still we don't see it.
An interesting observation I often make to speak to the point that you're making is that we don't really have to look very far. Right here in our backyard in Mustique, in Canoan, we have millionaires and billionaires who've taken up residence. A lot of them, to the best of my knowledge, and I stand to be corrected, are people in the arts. They're musicians, they're fashion designers, Tommy Hilfiger, they are directors, magazine people, and so on. So I think we've overlooked this level of inspiration that we have right here of people who are in an international space, creating, driving economies internationally, but they come here to holiday. We don't really get to interact with them very much. Well, I haven't had the good fortune as yet.
Well, no, I just had to jump in some little moments, like, not that I interact with them a lot, but in some little moments, like, persons have said to me, hey, Akley, is there like an intellectual class in St. Vincent? Do they have discussions? Do you guys talk about culture? Do you know? So it's like a big disconnect with how we treat them, like we other them as well. So we don't market things like this for them, and vice versa, like there's a big conversation that has to happen between local and tourists, local and foreigner, and then we need to like really decide where we want to go, ultimately.
With all that being said, I think one of the things that stood out to me was the realization that our society doesn't really see the arts as a quote-unquote job per se. And that is something that still baffles me to this day, because I'm somebody I entered university as a biology major. I left university with a degree in Caribbean studies. And I've utilized that degree in Caribbean studies more than I've ever utilized any aspect of my biology degree. Yet, as I was entering university, I was being asked, why are you pursuing culture? How is this going to relate to the Vincentian society? What are you going to do with it afterwards? So I think there needs to be an understanding that culture and the creative arts is not something that you do seasonally. It's not something that we hear about only during carnival time or when it's National Heroes Day, or maybe now and again around Christmas when it's getting closer to 9 mornings, aspects like that. But one of the most important things that I think that we're missing is in St. Vincent, there is no way for cultural and creative artists to actually manage their work. Yes, we can go ahead and have tea or coffee with people in Mustique and wherever else in the Grenadines. But when that is finished, how do you propose, each of you, this is the question, how do you propose managing your work? Because I know that a lot of your work is self-funded. A lot of it is setting up GoFundMes and applying for grants. And even in the application for the grants, we don't have that structure in St. Vincent. We don't have grant writing classes. UNESCO has started a transcultural program with courses in like project management, for example, for culture and creative industries. But how accessible are those to individuals that actually need those classes? So how have you, as cultural and creative artists and activists, managed your work thus far? What are the tricks and key things that you've learned throughout that development?
The secret.
All right. I have 2 comments before I actually begin to answer the question. I spent 30 years at the Department of Culture, and in each year there was a workshop on some element of management of artistic production. And there would be invitation for 100 people, and there would be 3. It might be songwriting for the junior calypso. There are 25 secondary schools, 60-something primary schools, and there are 15 teachers and students. So it is not that there has not been an effort to provide some of the learning. When the Copyright Act was considered, there were a series of meetings to try to explain to the general public and to the people who are in the creative arts that copyright cannot be done for you. You have to do copyright for yourself. You have to understand it, You have to put in place the various mechanisms, and then you have got to employ a lawyer and sue to protect your rights. And again, over a period of 5 years or so before the law was actually passed, meetings inviting 40 and 50 people had 3 and 7. I speak about this because I was at the Department of Culture and I was part of the process. Okay. Having shared those things, addressing your question of how to empower persons and how to find the secret to making these things work. The most basic element is that this has to change from being hobby to being work. When you are in a hobby, you do it if you feel like, you do it when it suits you, and you do it generally for the fame, I can use that phrase, for the notoriety. When you approach this thing for work, you realize that it is work, hard work. I am writing these days. If I do not get up every day and make an effort to write for 2 hours, then there is no work produced. I can speak to the fact that between the time that I started writing in my teens and when I produced my first book of poetry, I did one piece every 3 or 4 years. When I approach this as I am retired and this is what I am doing, I have a piece every week or 2. With the result that my first book of poetry is the result of collecting pieces from when I was a teenager to when I published. My second book of poetry and my third book of poetry were the result of active work. It's still not generating a lot of income, but the thing is there. The product is there. And I think that part of the challenge that we face in St. Vincent and the Grenadines is people not being willing to be serious about working. Where is your lawyer? Where is your business manager? Where are your accounts? Where are your taxes? The Ministry of Finance, and again I speak to my time while I was at the Department of Culture. The Ministry of Finance thinks that we in culture are a joke. Why? Because they don't see no tax returns. They don't see no generation of result. Yes, there's a carnival every year, and they know that the economy turns out and turns over a big sum of money, but that means that they then will give a space for carnival. But how do you get a duty-free concession for guitars and keyboards and drums, etc., when for the rest of the year, outside of carnival, the ministry thinks that you're only playing hobby? It's harsh to say, but I am no longer sitting in the department, so I can now say these things.
I think there's a few threads to tie together here in terms of the potential for the arts to generate income is very much tied to the attitudes or the preconceptions that we have had in the past towards the arts being marginal and a hobby and not connected to real national development. It's sort of a side thought. And this is a preconception that has been formed within our historical context of the colonial legacy, where culture, the cultural expressions were relegated or banned among the majority of the population and streamlined to be very limited, representing a minority. And it was always an imported or a foreign or the colonizers' interpretation. When I arrived here in 1992, which is some time ago, it was very interesting coming from a background of design and being a freelance artist and working in various countries and lecturing in the arts. When I came here, I recognized immediately the lack of artistic expression, visual arts. Those items that existed then were, as Tony is saying, sort of hobby art, hobby type art. And there was no concept of design. There was no concept of art as a profession. There was no concept of the role of design in society. And yet we know that design is directly connected to how society functions. Everything you can see that's man-made has been designed. So clearly the design process is very, very important and impacts the society in a huge way. But all of those areas, and I want to say this just to put a context in really how far we've come, because it's easy to dwell on what we're lacking and how much further we have to go. But literally within 20 or 30 years, we have seen huge development in the arts, in the attitudes to understand the role that the arts play in the society. Now we have a cadre of young professional artists now and musicians. Although we want to see more, we want to see it thriving more, we do have them. We didn't have them prior, Tony would remember, in the 1990s. And in the last 15 years or so, we've seen this cadre of filmmakers, fashion designers, graphic designers. We've seen fine artists. A lot are now teaching visual arts in schools. I mean, this is a huge progression, I think, in the last 20 years, and we have to really take stock and be thankful for it. And all of those who've played a role, and the young artists and musicians now are the role models for the present young generation. And when I reflect back on the days when I started the tertiary A-level art and design program in the college, we were teaching, we had no room, I was teaching in a corridor, bringing the books in a little basket, that was the art library. And it was a real struggle, because even though the students who were involved in this process were engaging, the parents, many of the parents didn't understand, and they felt that I was doing their child some damage. You know, they would come to me and say, "What are you doing? You're wasting their time. You know, there's no future in this." But obviously, as those students have developed and become and lived their art, many of them earning from their art now, they're the living proof that yes, the creative arts have huge potential. Our creativity that we have is enormous. I've seen it in the youth, I've seen it in the prisoners, I've seen it in farmers. It's how to focus on creativity as a life force, as something that can be developed to impact our lives in all sorts of ways, in different ways. And I think we're at a very important journey. The arts reflect the consciousness of a society, and therefore the artists are very, very key. They're playing a key role in the upliftment and the consciousness of the whole country. And I know that we all have this creative ability in no small measure. And I think the urgent issue to address right now is how do we ensure that we become aware of this power and this creativity that we have. Very interesting. We could
The songs that rang in my head when you said that was emancipate yourself from mental slavery, just the note itself. But what you're saying rings true. I think the problem is that a lot of artists here are afraid of failing. So they want to do the work, they crave the work. However, they're gravitating towards other things because they feel like if I pursue this road, it's going to be too difficult. Because I've seen spaces where there are dancers who practice for months on end for one performance, for one night, in different spaces. There are singers who by the time that they're finished, they're hoarse, they can't even speak. There are theater practitioners who get bruised from throwing themselves on the stage for different characters. There are filmmakers who pick up extra jobs to pay for their camera equipment. And that driving force is something that we need to see more often. So it's interesting to see the makeup of a Vincentian artist or a Vincentian creative. Because there are spaces like, for example, Barbados, when you commented on the colonial era ways that are still plaguing our people here. There are festivals like NIFCA, for example, that you've seen in places, in Barbados in particular, where there is an appreciation, despite colonial era laws, despite prohibitions and whatnot, those artistic forms still tend to thrive. I've seen a performance that was reminiscent of a spiritual Baptist and revival ceremony on stage for the dance performances in NIFCA. They have shaggy bears that come through the audience. So these are things that we need more in our Vincentian society. We need to divorce this fear of failing, this fear of not being taken seriously, this fear of, okay, maybe I should pursue something else for now. You know, and then you get sucked into a different realm or a different field. You wanted to say something?
Well, I mean, this is a can of worms. Because there are so many historical factors to consider. Everything that we've heard so far, you know, the concept of the creative life in society, what place that holds, from whence that came. And so for a long time, the pursuit of the conventional occupations, doctor, lawyer, engineer, and so on, would have taken precedence in terms of parents encouraging their kids to pursue. And if somebody demonstrates an interest in the arts, at various social status, that tended to be discouraged. And then you have our perception of success in the arts, which to me had always been influenced by what we would see on television, right? We would only see the ones who, quote unquote, made it. Well, for every one that, quote unquote, made it, there's 10,000 who didn't. But they continue to be practicing creatives. They're earning a decent living. I have encountered many of them. I had a stint on cruise ships as a vocalist, and quite a number of ex-Broadway performers find their way onto cruise ships, making a decent living. But the idea of success is the Jay-Z and the Beyonce and so on. And then you have this disconnect over the years from the creative process, the art, the practice of the art, and the business, which I must confess, it's not my favorite. It's not my favorite element of the whole thing.
Yeah, but that's why you have a manager.
And,
And I know your manager.
Well, I mean,
and he's hard. He makes sure you get paid.
It works if you could find somebody like that, but most are not able to, right? And so you have to consider how much time you're going to allocate to your creative process. And depending on what discipline it is, your creative process may take all day, and for some people it takes 5 minutes. And then how much time are you going to allocate to the grunt work that needs to take place in the background? Your marketing and your networking and ensuring that you have clients and all of that stuff. And again, dealing with some of the facts of industry, for lack of a better term. Fact number one, in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, our population is numerically incapable of supporting the kind of success that we see in the Beyoncés and the Jay-Z's, right? We just don't have the amount of people to buy. Well, I know Akley disagrees, but I found this is. Let me not paint everything with a broad brush, because there's some opportunities, I think, particularly in the visual arts, where things can be valued at a particular standard. But generally speaking, most of us have had to consider export as a way to sustain ourselves. We would supply the local market whenever we can, but there's a general tendency, okay, where else can I find a market for my music, for example? What other Caribbean territories can I get, markets can I get, festival markets can I get into? What other diaspora markets can I get into? And now with the increasing advent of platforms with the technologies that can be exploited, you have access to billions of ears and eyes and so on. But as the creative person, all I want to do is spend time writing songs or going into the studio and making the music and all that. All this other stuff, if this is, I would hope to have somebody else deal with this kind of, to have somebody else deal with this kind of stuff. But really, the complete artist has to consider the business aspect as much as, and in some cases, if not more than, the actual creative process to aspire to that level of success that we are often fed, right? So that the society Akley was talking about earlier can come along to see, well, yes, there is a space for us here, and we can actualize success at that particular level beyond just the hobby approach.
Hello? Yeah. So for me, I'll give you a little bit, just a little bit of the secret. A little bit. So for me, I guess motivation plays a big part, right? And as a creative, and Miss Rudette could tell you, when she met me, the thing I wanted to find out was who I was. It was a question that I wanted to solve. It was a thing I wanted to understand. What is this thing called a Vincentian? What is it? And who am I since I'm a part of it? I wanted to figure that out. And that's what I started or got a glimpse of in her class, like how I can figure that out through doing this artistic process, right? So after I had that experience, I was in a way transformed, because never was I able to answer that question in such a way, Usually you answer questions by talking or writing, but I created something and it was there now in front of me. Exactly. So it was like, okay, that's interesting. And then the journey continued, because it's not like if I had this great grand vision of how life would be, and but I had questions and desire and passion and drive, and also poverty, which is another thing, another challenge I wanted to solve. So essentially, my mind is hungry, my body is hungry, and I'm in an environment that is like wealthy and rich, you know. But how I see it now is as if like the wealth and the rich I wasn't able to turn it from raw resource into a finished product, and then I wasn't able to take this product to market, to the place where it needed to go to get the value, right? That was the problem that I needed to solve. And I mean, in some ways, I may have had glimpses of a solution, but I haven't solved it. But what happened was, it was two other things as well. It was two things I decided I wanted for myself. I wanted to be local, 100% local and from here without a doubt, right? And I wanted to be a part of this big global international festival, you know, not festival, but creative space. And I was like, how do I do that? How do I do that? How do I do that? Well, I grew up in like social media, you know, like High Five and Nets, MySpace, you know, all of these.
Dating, but
Yeah, but I'm telling you, it's like the journey, right? So it's like if you are able to like take control of a story and you can tell it through a space, then maybe I can market this idea I have of being a creative professional based here, and I could get in touch with people outside of here, and maybe some of them might want to come here sometimes, and maybe if I have the right training and education, they will know there are people here who we can work with, you know? So it became more of a strategy that I sort of like develop over time to kind of like understand what St. Vincent is, where it's positioned between North America and South America. I took it so far that I even learned another language because, we're in the middle of the Latin America, not, you know, like we're in such a strategic place because the Latinos sometimes have challenges with going to the north and going to Europe or whatever, but we don't have that challenge. They're our closest neighbors and rich, culturally rich. They've monetized it. Like, you guys look at Netflix, like a lot of those shows on Netflix are from Colombia. And what we know about Colombia is, you know, the other side of the news, right? But there's so much richness close by, and sometimes we just kind of focus on what comes true, what you have the challenge with, which is what I now understand as the globally accepted norms of distribution, right? That is the TV channels we look at, the radio we listen to, the kind of programming they push out, the agenda that they have, and where they position us in that, right? So then what I figure we could do is if we had the right skills on the ground and the ability to create the thing technically at that level that's global, we could disrupt that. And we could throw our narrative, how we see it, packaged, you know, distributed, presented as Erica's Country Style, completely finished on the shelf over there in Graves, you know? Like that's how you have to kind of like envision a product that's creative, right? Yes, I look forward to the time when I could have a manager to like help me to do what I'm trying to do. I look forward to that. But until the thing becomes at a kind of like sustainable level where it could create for itself, I can't afford to pay a manager. Right. You know? So you have to be real with yourself about that when you're like, when you learn these things as a generic, this is how you go about doing this, then you have to say, well, in Vinci, this is how this is, and this is how that goes. And I have to come up with a kind of like paper mache version of my own thing, my own collage of how I can be a creative entrepreneur. But at the core of that, I think are these three questions. Who am I? The intent, well, not questions, but intents or answers or conversations with self. Who am I? Which is what I want to figure out in my art and keeps me motivated. And who am I? It's me. It's also my community. It's also where I live in the world, you know, in terms of like my relationship to North and South, you know. That's who I am, and that's like wealth. So much wealth is here. And then it's also about making the decision to want to be here, right? Stay here on the ground, right? And find a way to sell the skills either here, outside, or attract people to come here to sell the skills here. And then the third thing is, of course, to be technically, professionally sound, that you are on the same level as Disney Disney's crew, when they show up, like you could talk the language with them. You know exactly what they're saying. When they send you an email and they say, oh, we want this, we want... If you're able to like speak that language, like that's how you get in, you know? And that's strategy, education, and looking for opportunities, you know?
Very, very well said, Akley.
I have one comment and the final question to all the panelists before we turn over to the Q&A segment. But with Akley, I've seen your work develop over the years, and I've seen you find yourself through your work and solidifying the Garifuna identity within St. Vincent with films like Sugarland and Mandulu and all these depictions that you have that centralize and make people know that St. Vincent is not a monolithic space. We're a diverse people, we're a rich culture. And that for me has been very fascinating to see. And I hope that you look at this moment now and think back to the student that you were with Miss Rudette and be proud of the work that you've done thus far and the work that you've continued to do, each and every single one of you, because this panel is an intergenerational panel. So some creative individual or youth out there is going to look here and feed off of these answers and these questions that you've been giving each other and sharing with the members of the audience. So with that, I'm curious, and this might be a bit of a touchy question, but it might be difficult to answer. How do you see the cultural and creative landscape in St. Vincent in the next 20 or so years? What do you envision?
Well, look, I don't think we've ever been wanting for raw talent, creativity in St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We are a very talented people. We've had to become talented by necessity because we lack certain resources. So we've had to be creative, all of us, over generations. And I could tell you, could be here all night talking stories about what my grandmother and great-grandmother, things they had to create in order to make life what it was. And those skills were passed on. I think we are in a unique space now, driven primarily by advancements taking place on the global level, particularly in technologies and communication. Hitherto, we would have all the talent in the world and we'd create all this stuff, but we were sort of cut off from the rest of the world because, you know, things would take so long to get to other spaces. Now, we all walk around with mass communication devices in our pockets, and we can talk to people on the other side of the world in an instant, and it opens up a whole new realm for creativity. And so 25 years from now, I envision the generations to come taking advantage of those opportunities and being able to reach persons that hitherto we had no way to reach. What I'm concerned about would be what we export, or what we reach them with. Right? Would those things resemble our authentic Vincentian selves? Would those things be influenced as much as we're trying to export? We are also very influenced by the things we import. And so with that coloring of our creative resources, I'm having a difficult time trying to imagine what that would look. Of course, I can't see into the future, but what would that look like with all these different, you know, influences coming from all around the world with this ease of communication and these platforms opening? Would we still have strong ties to the foundations of our creativity and our culture in what we communicate to the world? And how do we secure that as a legacy and as a part of our foundation for the generations to come, I think would be the challenge that we would have to confront.
I'd like to follow up from this with coming back to the metaphor of or the analogy with the crops and growing the crops. If the bountiful crops are our creative produce, and the soil is the creativity with which we create, which goes into the crops, which produces the crops, then we can nurture our crops in different ways. We can nurture them with inputs, chemicals, imported inputs. Or we can nurture them through regenerating the soil in a natural way, in co-creating with nature, observing nature, how nature takes its course. We can nurture our crops in a natural way from within our own soil. Do you understand the metaphor I'm giving here? We can draw on our own natural resources that are close to us, that we have bountifully, but we are starting to erode them. And I find it very interesting that there is now a sort of synergy between the approach that's being, well, in 2013 there was a UNESCO project to reform the cultural policy here. And it was looking more at how to protect and diversify cultural expression rather than the original cultural policy, which was to assist the development of the cultural arts. This reform to cultural policy is looking at how to diversify and protect cultural expression. I find that is very interesting. It has correlation in land conservation and in the natural environment. And that is no coincidence, really, that these two areas are linked intrinsically. Our culture and our creativity, historically and traditionally and ancestrally, has come from the earth, through nature, through our relationship with nature. When we talk about heritage and cultural forms and how do we preserve them, we must remember that they sprang from man, woman's response and connection with nature. And therefore, back to the nurturing of our creativity endogenously within with our own resources, then we have a strong, healthy, vibrant product, crop, cultural form. Interesting, the word culture actually originally means to grow crops and to rear animals. And then we have this strong, authentic, endogenous, different from anywhere else. And that is what is strong, as Akley has exemplified in his creative path, that you have this fine, robust, authentic form of expression that finds resonance internationally, impacts internationally, because it is unique and it is highly creative. And from there, I would like to just clarify the nature of creativity and the misperception we have had and we've been conditioned about creativity. It's not something that just some people have and others don't, and it's not just used in the arts. It's possible to have a creative arts program that is uncreative, in truth and in fact, and it's not necessarily that an artist is the person that can nurture creativity. Creativity exists in all forms, and I think we need to recognize creativity essentially as an attitude. And there are, as throughout my work with young people, and I don't want to call them students because they're my teachers, I have observed some very distinct, many, and I won't go into all of them, creative indicators of creativity. And one is, most children have it, constant questioning, a an insatiable curiosity, also a sense of independence, of expressiveness. On the other side of that, you can have the uncreative attitude. Don't ask questions, don't research, not interested, only in a linear path. Whereas the creative will be able to, or be interested in seeing things from many different perspectives, and be willing and interested to see something in many different perspectives. And this is what we used to learn through our drawing, is how to you see an object there, you look at it, but you draw it from different perspectives and it becomes something totally different than what you originally thought you saw, is how to explore the subjective nature of something from many perspectives. So there are, as I say, these indicators, and one of them is the ability to, or the willingness, and motivation is one that Akley was saying, to work together, to collaborate, to communicate, to encourage others, to have compassion. These are all indicators of a creative mind and a sensitive soul. On the other hand, we would see things like hierarchical structures, a right-wrong attitude, you or me, selfishness, is part of an uncreative disposition. We could see quite clearly that the societies nowadays tend to have an uncreative overall approach to management systems, institution systems, for various reasons. And even that is largely as well linked to a sort of sole profit-driven motive. But I just want to condense the fact that we can choose. We all are inundated. The Most High is the ultimate creator, and He has bestowed upon us, every single one of us, an aspect of His creative power. My wish in 20 years, my vision, is that we all embrace that we all recognize we have that, and that we make a proactive and creative choice. What are we going to do with that? How will we use it? And will we use it for the greater good and for those that come after us, or not, as the case may be? But my vision is that we will move more and more towards that recognition in working together and collaborating, and with that creative attitude, the creative arts sector will flourish.
I think I have one follow-up question for you, because your work is such a beautiful way of healing and expressing oneself, and through your work I see there's the African philosophy of Ubuntu, which is the concept of I am because we are. And it reminds me, last year I had the opportunity to visit Ingham County Jail in Michigan, in East Lansing, Michigan, where we used the philosophy of Ubuntu and the creative arts to examine how incarcerated individuals can heal through communal creative practices. And my question to you would be, what have you learned, or you keep saying that your students are your teachers, but what have you learned through engagement in this philosophy, or even without the philosophy? How do you use art as a rehabilitation process with using these incarcerated individuals? Or even how have you yourself, through this work, cultivated yourself and cultivating healing, whether within yourself or within your family or within your community?
And philosophical and spiritual question. How have I done it? In fact, I think, I'm humbled by your comments, I have to say, because I don't really feel I, as an individual, have accomplished much. It's always been a sort of guided journey, so that I'm very much aware that I am working with a spiritual directive. So I do not see a separation between us, and my daily reality might be quite strange to many people because I really see us all as part of each other, as I can look into our eyes, our common eyes, and see our belonging together. And that is really what I've always brought into my work, as I feel no separation. With regards to the prisoners who I've now been working with for nearly 10 years, they are amazing teachers for me. I've learnt so much working with them about human nature and the resilience of the human spirit that can be reflected in a single smile and a caring look. And of course we know that they're living in very, very dire conditions and situations, as have been the circumstances that have delivered them into that situation. But the power of creativity within the potential for creative projects and programs to rehabilitate the incarcerated is immense, absolutely immense. We struggle with funding and even with the recognition on an institutional level that this transformation is possible, because once again attitudes from the public, prejudices haunt those incarcerated individuals, and with that projection that's constantly forced onto them both within the institution and outside of it, this can break down the self-esteem and the motivation. But the creative projects that I've worked with them have been really incredible. And I do think at the end, I know, because I've seen it with my own eyes and experience, with my students and with the prisoners, that creativity is a transformational power. It transforms not only the medium with which we work as artists, or the sounds that we work with as musicians. It's not just transforming those elements into compositions, but it's also transforming within us an experience of being separate. Many of us feel separate when we create, and when our creations are received by others, we are connected. And in that sense, it's truly transformational. And I would just mention that in terms of the prisoners, I only went into the prison in Kingstown initially for 1 month to do a workshop and teach them some vetiver craft work. And the reason I stayed and just volunteered my time to work with them for some time was because I saw their response. Their response was indicative of high levels of creativity. And so I recognized they're individuals who are highly gifted. What are they doing in this place? And it's simply a misguided use of their creative abilities. And this is what I would like to see, in the next 20 years, that the recognition that we have this enormous potential, and for us to nurture it on a societal level, on a family level, as well as a community level, so that many of those individuals would not end up being confined in that way and bereft, of love and care, and most importantly, the knowledge that they are highly creative, God's children. Yeah, Thanks for that opportunity to share.
You're welcome. Thank you. Theobald?
I think I want to start with a very positive experience that I very recently had. I went to a jazz evening, and a young student, somewhere about 14, 15 kind of age, sang a couple songs. And then I got told that her parent was there with her and had brought her to the event, and the parent is actively encouraging her growth as a singer, has put resources into her learning music, keyboard and guitar, has made time available to her to hear older songs and the crafting that went into those songs, and is very respectful of the gift of that child's voice. And if that is where St. Vincent is going, then there is much hope for 20 years from now. And I was very impressed, very pleased, very thrilled to have had that opportunity of experience. There are other things that are unfolding in St. Vincent at this point in time that give me hope. And I am thankful for where the journey is at this point.
I want to thank each of our panelists for being so open with their experiences, so forthcoming, so honest. And I'm going to now turn over to any member of the audience who might have some questions.
We might need some house lights. Yes, and we might need a microphone in the audience. We have a microphone available, and we have some house lights.
Hi, good night. Thank you all for this really lovely discussion on how we can potentially develop the creative arts sector in St. Vincent. And I think, we'd be amiss if we have this discussion and there's no tangible, takeaway, right? So I guess my question to each of you on the panel is, what is a call to action? Something that we can do, in the next week, in the next 2 weeks, in the next month, that you think will really have an impact and, I guess, push the creative arts sector forward?
Well, I think we've already started in some respects. Traditionally, it's required voices. It's required organization. It's required groups of like-minded individuals to identify the areas of concern and bring them to the persons responsible for advocacy. In wider societies, they have lobbying body, groups of people who lobby Congress and to get changes and to enact laws, I guess, to secure that enabling environment that we discussed this evening, so that we can begin to see advancements. So it starts with the conversation. It starts with organizing around your particular groupings, and making linkages with other groups. We may not be in your discipline, but would like to see particular conditions improve for the arts generally. So that would be my recommendation. And from where I sit at Department of Culture, I have an open door policy, and we're always seeking to engage with the creative community to see how we can devise strategies moving forward, recognizing, of course, that we do have limited resources in St. Vincent and the Grenadines, but we're not limited by those resources. And we can, in fact, make advancements as we have been shown to do in various quarters over the years.
Yeah, I might even offer you or invite you to maybe look at some things we have here in St. Vincent from a different perspective, from the eyes of like what's necessary, to produce in terms of a creative, to acknowledge what we have already, if you want to say that. I feel it's quite evident that the facility, like the airport in itself has become like a really big part, in supporting, the creative industries. Another thing that I would like to point out also that I think is important for us is the internet, and that's how I kind of like to look at it, like what are the things that we have on the ground in terms of like infrastructure that is good, that can be improved, and then what are the other things that we think we would like to kind of like create this playground, which is what I'm looking forward to. Like I feel like when you have talent and the talent manifests itself as a product, what that product needs now is, the environment to turn it into a factory, so you could keep creating lush, delicious fruit to sell to these, to sell globally, because that's the opportunity we have, and we can do it all from right here. So it's really like, it's just a look at the elements we have to get our minds out of this is like Nepal, my homeland, is a wasteland. To get your mind out of, oh God, we don't have nothing here. Yo, we put off a great show the other night in Peacemo, and look at tonight, we're having a lecture. It's small, but like the Jamaicans just say, we liquor but we tallow. And well, the Christians just use that here a lot. But I'm saying it to say sometimes you have to just like confront your mindset and stop standing in your own way.
I can tell you what I'm very impressed by. I'm secretly part of a couple of WhatsApp chat groups. I don't see much in them, but I observe a lot. And I can see the knowledge share. I can see the community. I'm in the film group with the filmmakers community, and I see how they support each other. I see how they seek resources, how they allocate resources, how they combine resources, how they work on projects, how they promote the projects. I see the reach. It's not just local, it's regional, it's international. And they operate this enterprise on a phone. I would hope that at some point it moves beyond the chat group and it becomes a powerful lobbying entity that could advocate for a film commission or something that helps the next generation of filmmakers. I'm secretly part of the fashion designers chat group. Well, I'm giving away the secret. But again, similarly, I see how they operate and how they share and how they support and how they develop each other. I would like to see more of that across the other disciplines, in the theater arts, in the, I know again, I'm part of the music fraternity here as well, so I know there's one there. The craft and the other disciplines, the poets and the authors and so on. So we can become a very powerful bloc that lobbies for the conditions that would encourage creativity to not just be fostered, but to flourish, and for the creatives to become successful. Sharing information, I think, is the quickest way for us all to get on the same page and to know, chart courses forward.
So my answer to that question is that I would recommend that the focus for the Ministry of Education would be to develop creative education as part of the teachers' training course, and to have a big focus on how to foster, not just to foster creativity, but to teach in a creatively educational way, which is using nature-based education and experiential learning, because we can foster, and Akley has shown how quickly we can transform within a generation the creative climate. And so if we work with the teachers in their engagement with the children in the classroom, we can build the foundation of a new cadre, a new generation, and successive generations of creative minds for whom it is natural to express and for whom it is natural to work together and collaborate together. It's very, very important. We haven't mentioned much about the natural environment needing protection and urgent intervention for the future. But yeah, that's my recommendation, to focus on teacher education.
If I may become a little adversarial, Mr. Government Man, but so this is what I have to say, right? Those what's? Oh, yeah, those what? That's okay. Those WhatsApp groups that you've been watching and seeing what we're doing, Mr. Government Man. I want you to know those WhatsApp groups were created out of necessity, because in our desperation to organize ourselves, to get things done, and with the challenges that present themselves when we come down tongue and we knock on your door and we say, this is what we want to do. Sometimes you, Mr. Good Sir, right? Sometimes you as the individual, you're on board. But there's certain, what it is, policies, or what the budget is, or the focus for this year, or or how we just do things in Vinci. Sometimes that bureaucracy there itself. Me personally, I've been running around Kingstown for years, trying to market some. I'm not focusing on you. I'm just using the example. Just but because we share this frustration, and just to not be adversarial towards Bomani. Bomani and I have been collaborating for years on a dream to manifest the Châteauye movie. And we've been collaborating on that because as two Vincies, we have a desire maybe to sit in peace more and watch it and down Russell's. And we try to figure it out, But I'm saying it to say that these WhatsApp groups, even though you're saying we need to know how to bring it out of the WhatsApp group, out of the metaverse into the real world, we had to go into the metaverse in order to manifest because in the real world, there are all of these barriers, you know? And I just wanted to point that out. There's a thing that could potentially be confronted in the next week, if all you want, you know, you could tell me.
Agreed.
Again, I love the panel. I know every one of you. And I will elaborate on the question, the last question. Why is culture doing 25 years from now? If we do not put things in place right now, in the next 25 years from now, there will be no culture in Finland. Believe it or not. And the reason why I'm saying this, since 1972, I myself in a culture. I am culture. One of those, I went to a dance festival with no hard work. We went to the Queen Show, Jana, Mr. Sinner, Poetry. I have not seen the Ministry of Culture put something in place. It has to start in the school. I have never seen the Minister of Culture. He shouldn't be there. And the reason why I thought in the song, Mr. Kenny Nunny, Bomani Nunny, we all come and rolling culture together. When I heard this in the afternoon on the radio, I said, I have to be there. And I see a lady there, she thought, well, the filmmaking, I know it's a lot of intention, doing a lot of filmmaking, that is excellent. Bomani, fighting a lot in culture, the singer, and this young lady here, I really don't know to know her, but from what she thought, like she's doing a lot of things out there. So what are we doing here? If we don't have nothing to sell before when they come here, what no coming for? I went to the dance festival at Rockford Mall there. It started right there, people run around. This is where we started. And the standard of the dance, I am seeing 3.5 out of 10. The filmmaking, my family, I understand you have a degree in that is very good. But I would like you to promote and to encourage the youth, either in the secondary school level or in the primary school level. It will start there in the next 25 years from now. Thank you very much. There will be no culture in Finland.
I will at this point offer my 2 thoughts on what to do to ensure that there is something in 20 years. I think based on the faces I saw when we were just getting started before the process actually began on the stage here, many of the people in the audience are adults. And adults who have some sort of interaction with youth. And what I would ask you to do today, next week, week after, engage with your children, whether they are your biological children or the children that you encounter for your neighborhood or your sister or your brother. Engage with those children and begin the process of giving them a creative space. Bring them out to the show, Mock Hanging, next week Saturday. Bring them out to dance bongo. Bring them out. Be the person in their life who takes them to dance practice or to music, or sits down with them and appreciates their drawing, or buys them a box of crayons for Christmas. Thank you.
So I think it would be remiss of me not to answer my own concluding question. I did not know about Garifuna culture until I was 11 years old. And it was not through the school curriculum. It was not through history classes in my secondary school, in my primary school. And I remember asking my history teacher, because after I had gained this knowledge through a summer program from a Vincentian who came back to the island and said, no, this can't work, something has to change. I, of course, went back to school and I questioned my history teacher. And her comment was, I have to teach what is in the prescribed syllabus. Since then, what I've been doing is teaching Garifuna classes to individuals, along with a colleague of mine who's sitting in the audience right now, to children at the Clap for Fun summer program. But this program is not going to make sense if when we teach during the summer and these children go back to school, they lose all the information that we're teaching them. That is not sustainable.
Welcome to the 2024 National Performing Arts Festival. The Bank of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is proud to partner once again with the Ministry of Tourism, Civil Aviation, Sustainable Development and Culture to present this exciting event under the theme, Envision, the Art of Creating. Tonight, we are